Welcome to another episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome, everybody, again to another episode of our show, bringing another really fascinating guest today involved in creating a better tomorrow for millions of people out there. Today, we are joined on the show by Yael Elish, who is Chief Executive Officer and founder of StuffThatWorks. This is a company that offers a really unique online platform where people suffering from various chronic diseases can share information to ultimately learn what treatments work best for their specific condition based on the experiences of their peers, and combined with a really interesting smart AI-based crowdsourcing system, sort of brings together a really powerful tool for addressing these diseases as we move forward. A really passionate entrepreneur with expertise in crowdsourcing and various consumer-facing products. Yael was on the Waze founding team that is now a subsidiary of Google that provides satellite navigation software on smartphones and other computers. There she drove their product strategy that led the company from their first user to the world's most notable crowdsourcing endeavor. She also co-founded various companies, including eSnips, NetSnippet, was part of the senior management team that took Commtouch, successful IPO in 2000. Prior to that, led various sales and marketing efforts for startups in Israel. Did her undergraduate degree in foreign relations from Hebrew University of Jerusalem. A lot to get into today. Very important set of topics. Yael Elish, thank you so much for taking time from the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And it was a very long bio. I forgot I had all these things in the past.
Well, it's an awesome bio, and before we get into all things, stuff that works and talk about healthcare and everything like that, I would love to start off earlier on. I mentioned about Waze in the bio, but I would love to, if you could take us back a little bit to sort of some of those early days and some of your learnings, because clearly in that model, and remember, so you have a really powerful system, connecting into global positioning, but at the same time, bringing in user submitted information, merging these together for a really important app. I wish we could talk for a few minutes about those experiences, because I think they sort of lay the groundwork for everything that happens next.
About Waze, right? You're mentioning this. Yeah. That was a fascinating experience. In essence, you had very established companies, multi-billion-dollar navigation or map companies, Navtech, TomTom, TeleAtlas, controlling the map space, and making millions and millions, and everyone had to pay a lot of money to license these products, and the products were pretty much very crappy. Navigation systems were crappy at the time. So the company decided to take this on, where the primary initiative was to build maps using crowdsourcing. So to just replace these maps with crowdsourcing. It's not traffic. People know Waze as traffic, but the real amazing and complex thing, in my opinion, was the actual building of the maps. So the app that we created was an app that allowed anyone to, so it was a navigation app. The interesting thing about crowdsourcing is that it's very challenging, because you have to have people use the app to build the map, but why would they use the app when it doesn't provide any value back? So this is where you have to be really you have to get a buy-in on the vision from people, and at least you have to, they need to appreciate the idea and say, okay, I won't use it now because it doesn't do much for me, but I'll use it later on.
Mm-hmm.
So we created this app where people just said, look for wherever the destination is. If the route looks very weird to you, never mind, just drive. And Waze learns quickly. And people drove around, and we encouraged that driving around. So the driving is what made the dots, be collected and form the roads. And the driving is what formed the direction and the turns where you can and cannot turn. So this is the actual driving of people using the app.
Mm-hmm.
And the GPS points that were collected is what actually was used to create the maps algorithms. And on top of that, you had a community of people that were connecting the roads and doing all these things on the platform. So to encourage that, we had some gamification, and we had little things on the map that you had to go and get, and we put them in places where we didn't have enough information about the map. And it was like a real challenging experience, where in the beginning there was nothing. So in the beginning there was nothing. We would look at the map and we would see one person in the entire US, and we were so excited. And then 2, 3, 5, but crowdsourcing is a very difficult thing, and I think you really have to have faith in what you do, because otherwise it's extreme. It's like the extreme of consumer. Consumer is a difficult thing to take on, right? Because to market something to a lot of people. But then crowdsourcing is like the extreme of that, because you're actually trying to get people to use something that doesn't provide value back. And you need a lot of them. You need everyone to use it for it to be actually successful, and to build the entire map and to generate traffic and all of that. So like, it's the hardcore extreme of consumer marketing. And the product is the heavy lifter here. So I'm really proud to have been the person who led the product strategy at the time, from inception to the end. And yeah, that's it was very, very exciting. I think the team is what makes the difference here, and faith more than anything.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a very exciting story on its own, but clearly lays the groundwork for what you get into next. And just to sort of set the stage here, I think all of us, whether it's ourselves or our loved ones or friends, we all know somebody that has some type of chronic disease, but I add one other word to that, sort of an unmet chronic disease. And we have for a while now we have this thing called the internet, and we can put a disease into it, but what comes back is sort of an infinite amount of information that everything from hardcore scientific literature to, I guess, very questionable stuff and everything in between, and no unified tool to sort of put it all together, review, compare. Talk a little bit about what got you interested in this space. And I know there's a personal story behind it, but if you would take us there with your experiences and why you decided that healthcare would be the next thing that you would want to disrupt with this very interesting crowdsourcing expertise.
Yeah, I think that in health, the more I know the health space, the more I'd say, mind boggled. So anything in our lives, whether it's stuff that we're buying, we're doing things online, there's so much information about us. So the companies that provide the services to us, they have a ton of information, massive amounts of information about us, about behavior, about everything, and decisions are made based on that. And health, which is the most important space, for us, there's nothing. There's no data. Nothing is data driven in that sense. So all the information that exists about conditions was actually curated I don't know, 70, 100 years ago by people. So those are small quantities of information curated by people, not necessarily representing the, how conditions really represent themselves in the real world. This is what doctors learn in schools. Treatments, the only information about treatments comes from clinical trials. Clinical trials are very small, very controlled, clearly not representing the entire population that is later using the drug. No information is collected from real world about what actually happens with these treatments. So this is all stuff that I learned only later, but we're being treated in reality on a trial and error basis. Treatments are not compared, populations are hardly compared. Clinical trials are extremely expensive, so the only treatments that are going through clinical trials are drugs. And doctors, because they are, they do no harm and you have to be evidence-based when you work, you use only drugs. So basically the entire information is controlled by pharma, very small, very, very small numbers and not representing the real world. So everyone realize that in real life, because we go to Facebook and Facebook groups. This is a massive. So Facebook groups is probably the biggest, 500 million people groups. For every chronic condition, you would have 10, 20, 30 groups that are extremely active. And people ask the same questions, and then people respond, and the same thing happens over and over again, but there's nothing registered there. So in essence, it's not resolved. The problem is there, and this is why you go to others and you try to get the information and you try to do your best in terms of researching, but this is not a data-driven approach. This is just asking, and people will share their experience, but you don't have data at the back end of this. This is how, in my personal experience, I did end up discovering, because I'm a relentless researcher, I will end up finding something and I'll spend a huge amount of time if it's needed. But this is not how things should work. Most people don't have this amount of time to either better diagnose yourself or your kids by becoming a researcher, which changes everything when you're better diagnosed. And the second thing is treatments. The treatments that you're being given are not necessarily the best ones overall, or not the best ones for you, or your doctors many times are not aware of treatments that exist, or they are aware, but they never tried them. So they will, again, for the do no harm, they will not treat you with these treatments. So the combination of all of that is that you are really treated on a trial and error basis, and there's not much to do about it because there's no information. The information is in silos. Hospitals, doctors, they all keep their information internally. It doesn't go anywhere. It's not structured. It's not organized. So every entity has its own data, and even the data that exists there is not organized and structured to be able to do these, to draw these interesting insights. So the reality is really that it's the Middle Ages in that sense. You are treated on a trial and error basis based on very, very little information. And if you will research, you will find treatments that will work better for you. If you will research, you will end up diagnosing yourself better. If you research, you will end up realizing that when you're being told that there's not much that you can do about it because it's, this is a chronic condition, you can just manage the symptoms. No, you can do about it, and you can sometimes cure it or put it in remission in many cases. And no, not everything is Western or drug-based, and there are other approaches. Science is not exclusive to the Western world. So, and things are way more holistic and not as mechanical as they seem to be. And the causes of chronic conditions are not necessarily what, It's more everything is more complex and not one-dimensional. But the data for researching all of this stuff doesn't exist. There is no one place. There's a total disconnect between patients in the real life and the medical world. Disconnect.
Yeah.
Disconnect between patients, disconnect between their data, disconnect between the entities, and a totally fragmented system that can't even start making up for that. So this is where the solution is crowdsourcing. That's the idea. When there's such a big problem and people suffer, people can unite, and crowdsourcing is what will, that's the only, in my opinion, is the only way to solve something like that. People are incentivized, they have the information, they know about, themselves, they know about the condition, they know about the treatments that they've tried, they know what worked, what didn't work, they know over time how things change. And they have access to their medical records. They can provide access to geospatial data. So they are the key to solving everything. If they participate, you can build the most formidable database ever for chronic condition research.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you make some extremely important points there, especially when it comes to sort of the trial and error piece of that. And we talk about personalized precision medicine. We've talked about it for years, and sort of the differences between you and me and Glenn over there, and how one drug works in me, not in you, and gives him a side effect. We need lots of data, we need lots of information, and that's sort of really core to what you've set up at StuffThatWorks. And I really see, and you can walk us through this and take your time with, but I really sort of see three pillars. One, just the sheer amount of patient data, and to date, I guess the numbers that I've seen on the site, you have 3 million members currently, something like 1,250 conditions, 1.3 billion data points, clearly capturing a tremendous amount of real world data. The medical advisors, which we'll get into in a bit, and then of course the AI, the tech behind this all. Walk us through a little bit about, I guess, again, like I mentioned, when you're at Waze, you were there sort of for user number one. What was involved in sort of going from user number one in this case to user 3 million? I mean, I clearly, I have one user. Okay, that's not enough. 10, not enough. When did things start sort of becoming enough where, okay, we have something here? And talk about how we get into the system as a patient. I guess we can start off there.
Yeah, so the concept is actually very simple, and what differentiates StuffThatWorks from a Facebook group or discussion groups, health discussion group and all that, is that we've taken a data-driven approach. So the idea is that you're not just talking with people. That's also available within the platform, but this is a data collection endeavor, data sharing endeavor. And the idea is to collect data and put it in structure. So it occurred to me at some point that it's not only, first of all, that we will not do it one condition and then the next. We will create it as a platform where everyone can create a condition if it doesn't exist. And the whole thing will be automated and not controlled by us. So the whole thing is crowdsourced. You decide that you want to open a condition that doesn't exist on the platform. Everything is available for you there. All the mechanisms are in place to start the condition, invite people, and the data collection, normalization, and everything automatically works. So in essence, it occurred to me that we should have all conditions on the platform, but also have consistency in the data collection of all patients and all conditions, so that we have a grid of perfect data, meaning that for every condition, every patient collects or shares the exact same data, and for all conditions. So, for example, the onboarding survey would be, how old are you? the gender, what is what comorbidities do you have? What are the symptoms? What are the early symptoms, and so on. And as you can see, I'm asking these questions without even specifying the name of the condition. So you can have a unified data collection for across all conditions. And this is what then lets you compare everything across condition as well. So you can see a symptom and you can see the prevalence across all conditions, because it's going to be normalized in the exact same way across all patients. And this gets to the question, to the drug repurposing and all that. If you have this exact same data collected from all people, it means that you can later, you're comparing apples to apples all the time. And then this is where you can start making discoveries. That was the idea in the foundation. And I think that that's, in essence, like the most powerful thing, because this is where everything else really suffers from data that is not consistent. Lack of consistency doesn't allow for very good research.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea was just to automate everything, to make it consistent. When you join a condition, you are immediately sharing a lot of information, and this is what and then a website is created and a community is created and information is shared back. So immediately information is being analyzed automatically across all conditions, but and the community condition is getting information all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Little insights coming up, and then it's growing, with more. You reach 10 people, you get the first insight. 50 people, you get a couple of other insights. 100 people, the platform already automatically lists all the treatments that have tried, reported as tried.
Mm-hmm.
About 500 people, an AI algorithm already kicks in and does comparative effectiveness. The onboarding survey is geared towards understanding the effectiveness also.
Mm-hmm.
And then at about 2000, it also already develops subgroups, detects subgroups within the population for who certain treatments seem to work better than others, and insights about side effects and symptoms. So the whole platform is all completely automated to give back insights, and it's open. So the insights are open to the world. So SEO is working on the platform, and this is what drives more people to the platform and more conversion, and people invite other people, and that's in essence the idea. And the more people in a condition, the more data, the more people join. So this is how, in essence, it's growing. So then on top of that, you can later connect your wearables, and you can start documenting on over time the changes in your symptoms, the changes in treatments, the changes in how you feel. So this is kind of a journey documented. And soon you're also connecting your medical records. Geospatial data is already, you're consenting to geospatial data, so that is being added as well. And it's in essence, it's an endless data aggregator platform. The idea here is that for patients, this will always be free. This is how crowdsourcing works. The patients are part of the vision. Patients are building the platform that will empower everyone to learn. Mm-hmm. The data will always be used by nonprofit organizations to generate insights and conduct research. And this is a space called real-world evidence. It's a different branch of real-world evidence. It's a patient-centric brand. That's a crowdsourced branch of real-world evidence. Real-world evidence today is more just medical records and claims and analysis of medical data that's separate from the patient and that has no subjective context.
Right. Right. Yeah, no, it's I spent a little time in there, sort of moving around in the open research communities, and then obviously we'll link to all this, but you break it out, very nicely. Sort of there's the most tried interventions, then the ones are classified as most effective, and then you break that down further from surgeries, drugs, alternative medicines, lifestyle. The other category, I think repurposing and other things fall in there. Um, what is the role? Because you have quite a long list of medical advisors that have expertise, across some of these therapeutic sort of disease segments. What is the medical advisor role here, and how do they ultimately interface with the research communities?
So the medical advisors in many of the cases have actually conducted research on the platform and are validating in different ways the platform. So it could be comparing the data that's on the platform to the guidelines, for example, for treatment. Is there a representation of the guidelines? Is there not? And mostly conducting research on the platform. We've initially thought of having medical advisors be more involved, but at the end of the day, we saw that it's data and it's engagement, it's patient engagement, and it's data collection, and the name of the game is data and AI and analysis. So
Right.
when you're in big numbers, this is what you're doing. So just overseeing that the way the data is collected is um, consistent with how we want to do research later on. Uh, so, for example, being with the standards ICD-10 for treatments conditions, so that the platform will be as viable as possible for high-end medical research, so that the methodology will be applicable to as much as possible to conducting high-end research on the platform.
And along those lines, again, because you pretty much every possible condition in here, and everything from the most common conditions to tons of rare diseases. Could you say a couple words? Because I know, one of the things that was public from a couple months ago was a relationship with the Marfan Syndrome Foundation, and I thought this was quite interesting because in a nonprofit aligning with your group to ultimately, in the case of a lot, and we have something like 10,000 of these rare orphan diseases. Talk a little bit of that. I think that's kind of important to, especially when it goes to these diseases that we don't have a lot of data on, and rather small populations. How you see stuff that works, adding sort of to value to many of these foundations that are clearly looking for options for their patients.
Yeah, so we see StuffThatWorks really on a mission to provide information, data to patients and to research communities, to advocacy group, to anyone who's trying to advance medical research for chronic conditions. And patient advocacy groups specifically are, not usually not very rich, and generally collecting information from patients is a complex thing to do. Registries exist as a way of collecting information about patients. I don't know if you're familiar with them. Yeah. And these registries are complex to put together, outdated. Frequently, there is no return engagement with patients updating. So we see ourselves as a modern registry that can serve nonprofit organizations and patient advocacy groups at no cost, for free. And it's more for us the developing of our platform and enabling that, but it is in our mission to do that and to make the data available for free. For example, the Arachnoiditis Foundation as well, just very soon releasing a publication using our data. And I have to say that the publications I'm seeing are so humble in terms of the descriptive information about the condition. Even it's the lack of information about patients in the real world is so huge that we can see that we can make a very, very big difference by empowering, with such openness on our platform and making the data available and accessible. And we're still a small startup, so we're still we have to choose where to focus and tons of areas to focus, but it's definitely on our very high priority to open up and enable research. Actually, one of the closest projects that we have now is we've announced a data exploration platform that is AI enabled. And we are inviting the first patients to be the ones to access the platform and research it and generate the initial insights on the platform. So I see it as also my role to provide simple tools to simplify everything to the level where, a normal person, a patient, not necessarily a data scientist or a researcher, can look at data and explore and find interesting things. And this is how we created the platform for very simple data exploration powered by AI, allowing anyone who has this curiosity for data or for research, and you usually have a certain percent and in every condition that are the researcher type, they'll receive access, and they'll be the first ones actually researching the data in a simple way and publishing the data. So that's their way to also contribute to others.
Yeah, and again, going back to the Marfan situation, I mean, it seems like they're, with all the rare orphan diseases we have out there, it seems like it's just a natural that many of these organizations are going to want to work with you in that particular model based on what you put together here. So that's, it's very encouraging. Can you say a couple words about, I know I read this piece on, what was going on during COVID with this system, and it seemed like, obviously in that particular case, a lot of different angles, right? I mean, obviously dealing with the core disease itself, but now with long COVID, the psychosocial component of what was happening during coronavirus. Tell us a little bit about some of the things you learned from that period, because it seemed like, here's a condition or set of conditions that, clearly, it's not just one thing, right? And would love to get some of your learnings about from that period, because I think they're kind of important as well as another interesting example of how the system can be used.
Oh my God, yeah. So we've tracked for a long period of time, I think for at least 2 years, the development of long COVID symptoms in patients with chronic conditions. I think we have probably the only, like, the biggest data set for that, both in every aspect possible. So, aggravation of the chronic condition symptoms themselves, the specific conditions that they've developed, the number of the type of shots that they received before, pretty much every possible question that relates to long COVID. And we've tracked that over time. I haven't looked at the data recently, but that's a massive, I think that at least half of the user base has documented the long COVID findings. I mean, the long COVID symptoms and findings. So in the same way, we've done recently the study for the barriers for participation in clinical trials. So I think these are examples where mega events that are going on can in real time, near real time, provide insights into how large numbers and of the population are feeling, compare who is impacted more by condition, by comorbidities, by age, so the data can be sliced, diced, and analyzed for an endless a number of use cases. Once you have that, but I think that what's interesting here is the real-time effect of it, and this is something that we know and we're excited about at Waze as well. When you have an engaged community and you decide to take on a new topic, for example, at Waze it was, for example, deciding to add gas stations and prices of gas stations to the map. From the moment you make it available, within days, 2 weeks, you have the entire thing mapped. So every gas station in the world will be mapped within several weeks on the platform. So I think that this conveys more than everything the power of crowdsourcing. Within days, you can get a very accurate representation of what is going on. You can track things over time, as long as you have the right data foundations and the right relationship with patients. So crowdsourcing is all about relationship and all about shared vision, trust. A lot of elements go into crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing is fascinating.
Yeah.
At scale, yeah. No, seriously, I mean, it's difficult, it's complex. It's not many companies have succeeded in crowdsourcing at scale because I think it requires I think people, consumer, anyone, they sense who's behind the endeavor, and you really need to really have a vision and really have faith in what you do, and they feel what you are and who you are and whether or not you are there for them, and you're going to drive this all the way home. Let's call it this way. So there's a kind of a very tight relationship that is being formed. There's respect, there's mutual respect. We treat our users, patients as almost investors. They know a lot about the company, where we are, what the challenges are, what's next, what's coming up. They get to say things. They are the first ones to use the most advanced features. We get feedback. So there's a dialogue that's ongoing.
Absolutely. Along these lines, one of the other things that you completed recently, and you just did a press release about this 2 weeks ago, was this patient survey where you looked at something like over 6,000 folks and engaging interest in learning about clinical trials for unmet medical needs. And it was quite interesting. I mean, you saw a tremendous amount, upwards of 93% of the people you surveyed interest in participating in these studies, very motivated because a lack of existing therapies, no treatments available. I was kind of surprised by the 13% number that, was like the amount of people's doctors that explained that, hey, there's clinical trials here that potentially could be useful for you. Can you talk a little bit about why you set out to do this survey, and then a little bit about what sort of the clinical trial vision per StuffThatWorks is all about? Because clearly, there's a lot of other companies out there that are set up just to, hey, you got the arthritis, here's the drug companies that are doing studies. But I think what you're probably going to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, thinking back to the real world evidence model and a lot of the stuff we see now in terms of distributed clinical trials and digital, studies at home and all this stuff, I think there's probably a lot more that you potentially are thinking about with your system. So take us through a little of your strategy, your vision there for where clinical trials fits into all this.
I think that it's, again, one of those things that you become curious about, like what's broken, why is it broken? You have clinical trial, pharma companies losing mostly, millions for every day of trial that is delayed because of a lack of failure to recruit. And you have on the other side patients who are very eager to know and learn about and participate. And how is it, and you're only talking about like a handful of 100, 200 people that need to go into these trials. So what's the, we got curious about trying to understand, where is the failure? I can't say that we're, totally on top of that, but we are curious about this space, and we're curious about potentially cracking this space as well, because clearly patients are feeling that they have exhausted. Many chronic patients are feeling that they've exhausted the treatment options, which is 42%. It's huge. 60% are saying that their condition is moderate, severe to severe. So there's a lot of suffering going on, and patients are interested in hearing about clinical trials. So we're kind of we're still in the process of figuring out what's wrong and whether we can become a significant, force here in bridging the gap, because at the end, it's again the disconnect. There's obviously a disconnect. There's two reasons that this is not working. One is that the patients fail to address the criteria of the trials. So finding patients is very difficult. I don't know if you know, but there is no way of advertising to patients of a chronic condition today. The companies like Google or Facebook, they self-regulate because you never told them really that they can use this information to approach you with something. So it's almost impossible to advertise and find patients, extremely costly. So you cannot access the patients, let alone screen the patients for the right criteria for the protocol of the clinical trial.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like shooting in the dark, right? You need to see a ton of people to find the right ones. So this is the online challenge, right? You have to screen a ton of people to recruit them first, and then to screen them, and then a very small portion of them would be relevant. Very costly process. And when you're talking about the approaching their doctors, which is what would probably be very efficient, because people also trust their doctors. So what you have there is it seems like a problem with alignment of incentives, because their doctor doesn't want to give them up. They're a source of revenue in a sense. If they're going to the clinical trial, they will no longer be there.
Mm-hmm.
So there's again, it's a fragmented system, no alignment of interests. So the motivation was to try and really better understand what is first of all, what are patients interested in? What are their barriers? Are they really interested in it? To what extent? And then what the barriers are. And then on the other side, we're figuring out more about the industry barriers. And we're trying to see whether there's a better way to a more efficient way to facilitate, because if it's all about disconnect and data, we have access to the patients, we have their data, we can easily have access to their medical records, so we probably have the right patients. Now, to onboard them to the right clinical trial, this is like another challenge, another set, which is more, I guess, organizational. But this is the direction. I believe that this is where things should be going.
Mm-hmm.
Patients should be on StuffThatWorks with their data, ready to enroll on a clinical trial together with the data, instead of populating the data manually once the patient. So everything is being done over. This industry works in a way where everything is being done again and again and again. So recruiting patients for every project from scratch again, screening them again, typing in the data again. This doesn't make sense. You have to have one place, like a pool of patients that are interested in participating, that will be exposed to the right and relevant information, that will be educated, will receive the opportunity to level eyes with whoever runs the clinical trial to hear more before they enroll, go along with their data without having everyone retyping and reorganizing data, and participate in a clinical trial. So this is the part that needs to be streamlined. There's still research for us to do, but this is an interesting direction that we're pursuing.
And along those lines, you mentioned at the beginning in your intro about the fact, not all, medicines come out of the West. We have these other sort of hybrid situations or sort of existing gray zones, everything. I love to point to the situation with the diabetic wonder drug metformin, which was released in Europe in 1957. It wasn't approved here in the United States until 1995. So you have these imbalances of what's an approved drug somewhere, not elsewhere. You have things that are OTC products in one country that may be drugs in another. And then, of course, the whole area. And I mentioned that there's a segment for alternative complementary medicines on the site that, again, that's its own gray zone. Say a few words about this, you will, because these are very interesting opportunities. And, we have in the United States different rules on, things like importation, that if I'm dying of a certain disease, it's unmet, I can access medicine X from Italy if it's available and bring it to the United States and so forth. Any interesting things that pop up in sort of the gray zones as you put the structure together?
I'm specifically or personally really interested in the role that non-drugs, or basically lifestyle, is playing in chronic conditions. And I also see a responsibility to be more proactive in educating patients. Not me personally, but information. I consume information that has been life-changing for me. I've from my personal experience have sent to remission in my family many conditions, many chronic conditions that have started, and improved the situation for myself and for family members and whoever listens to me over and over and over again, by just being more educated and changing lifestyle, and realize understanding the central role that these things are playing in the emergence of chronic conditions and in the treatment of chronic conditions. And I find it shocking that this is not information. Again, we're living in an information imbalance or misinformation society, where people are not getting the right information, not getting the information that they should be really getting. I don't know how, why, if it's intentional or not, but the focus is all wrong. It's all, I don't know if you know the book, The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate.
Okay. Say a few words.
It's an amazing person, and he's basically saying that you're living in a society where everything is really not normal, but because everyone does something, it's supposedly normal, right? So your kids are eating, and you are eating everything that's that's terrible for you and for your health, from morning, from day to evening. You're loading your system 400% times more than what it should be eating in terms of carbs and all that. And then conditions are formed, and then you're taking a drug, and then you're taking another drug, and you've no clue. You're completely unaware of the fact that metabolism is playing like a critical role in all these things. you're not aware about the mental health role that's taken, that and how central it is to things, and like the connection between them and so on. So, I consider myself to be an educated person. I consider myself to be someone who researches, but it's only recently that I ended up understanding things that I think I should have be aware. I should have been educated for or be aware of significantly early on in my life. It's way more holistic than this is broken and take, this drug to fix it.
Right.
And also, um, clinical indicators are also not so one-dimensional as they seem. Like a clinical indicator, you can be low on iron, but it will not affect you as a person. But I can be, high on iron and still be, my body needs more iron. So the clinical indicator of the level of iron in your body is not necessarily reflecting in the same way with people. So there's like over focus on indicators and things that are like hard and simple to assess, and very little of the rest that is impacting our lives. So I think that this is also the role of the platform. Unfortunately, our algorithms are, if you want to detect effectiveness of treatments in a society where the guidelines are very specific about what you will receive as treatments, there is no diversity. So in essence, people are just taking the drug that they're being given. It's not that there is a choice and that people are like finding their own things. So effectiveness is difficult to, like finding new things that would be effective is difficult because most people take the drugs that they're given or whatever treatment is provided in the guidelines. I don't know if it's like that this point was really clear, but
No, I see where you're going.
yeah.
No, makes sense. I mean, and somewhat related to that, as I was surfing, through your open research communities, I was impressed that, I come up, once you go through all 1,200 or some that you have there, you come to this one section on environmental intolerance or, multiple chemical sensitivity. And, here, we're not dealing with the drugs, but we're dealing with the cleaning products and perfumes and issues, everything else that affects us that we don't normally think of. And it's, kind of interesting. We're going to have the head of HHS very shortly that's very concerned about all that stuff. So again, I thought that was kind of unique that you had that in there, and I peeked around in there. I was unfamiliar with the term environmental intolerance, but I get it now. So yeah, it's interesting how you're bringing in more than just the medications into this conversation. So
Yeah, for us, we're this was also something that was very clear to us. We were not the ones inserting the types of treatments. Anything that is reported by anyone is being normalized as a treatment. And you could say, religion is what helped me, and this person will be, it will say, religion. But then you have the numbers, the big numbers. So numbers basically are what and ends up describing, what works and what doesn't work. That's the idea. But every treatment reported is a treatment for us that goes into the database.
Got it. Yeah, what should we be on the lookout for 2025 in terms of stuff that works, in terms of you, in terms of other public facing initiatives that you want to mention while we have you today? Anything I missed? Please take the floor.
I think that for the first time we really have the opportunity, and I didn't mention, but $35 million were invested in building this platform, And we had the luxury of building the platform so that it would be ideal, not for monetization, but ideal for real data collection for the purpose that we're actually collecting the data to really, build the first large-scale patient-centric real-world data set. And what's exciting for us this year is that for the first time, we'll put to use the data. So the data is becoming available with friendly tools to different organizations. But most interesting and exciting to me is to make it available to patients. So and patient, enthusiast patient researchers to be able to research the data and publish their findings, because I really know that patients are the best investigators for their condition, and the only thing you need to do is just give them the tools to discover. They're most minded for their condition. They already have insights that many doctors don't have about their condition without even having data and tools, just because they're minding and passionate to understand. So that together with data, and by the way, data is very powerful because it arms you with something. It's not you like have researched and you think that and you have, so I think that empowering patients is also not just with information, but also with data to prove.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have data, you're what I called leveling the playing field. You're no longer this, little patient that has to just take any information that is being given. You may end up as a patient having more information than your doctors. I mean, you may have research that is more advanced than other researchers. So yes, the goal is to simplify as much as possible the access to the data, and AI now is doing that in an amazing way. You could, simply with ChatGPT even type your query and say what you're trying to research, who you want to compare to what,
Mm-hmm.
treatments by this, by that, and get to findings. So to me, this is really exciting for the first time to give back like the tools for research to patients in our communities that have contributed information.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, it's again, it's extremely impressive, and again, to see what you've built from patient zero up to 3 million members, and the wide array of these research communities, and again, we'll put the links to everything in the bio. Yeah, really, really awesome stuff. I'm very impressive model, and just wishing you and the team the best with this as you continue to grow it in 2025, and also enter all these other types of interesting relationships to leverage the potential of it all. Really very impressive. For everybody that is going to be listening to this episode of the show across the various podcast networks, or watching with us on the YouTube channel. Again, you've been spending time with Yael Elish, Chief Executive Officer and founder of StuffThatWorks. Yael, I want to thank you for taking the time out your schedule today to talk to us for a little while, to introduce us to the system and everything that's going on. I say thank you for what you do to create a system like this, because it's clearly a major unmet need. And as we like to say on our show, thanks for helping to create a better tomorrow for millions of people out there via what you're doing. Really impressive story.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure meeting you and being here.
Great talking to you.